Okay friends, it's time to get started on our job. One of the first things we want to do is raise and support the front of the vehicle so the wheels are off the ground. You can do that right with the pinch rail right along each side. After that, we're going to go ahead and remove our hubcap, remove all 4 of these 21mm lug nuts, and then the wheel. Now that we have the wheel off of there, let's go ahead and follow our flex hose up to where it connects onto the strut itself. There's going to be a little clip on here that you want to grab and remove it from the strut. Let's grab onto that flex hose. We're going to try to wiggle it around a little bit, see if we can break it free. Now we've got plenty of slack from that. Let's move along to the ABS wire. You're going to find 2 mounting points that hold this to the strut. There's one on the forward side and one right on the back that's in the same position. Now we can move along to removing the upper sway bar link from the strut assembly. Now typically on this, you're going to want to use a wrench along the back side of the strut. There should be something to be able to grab onto. You could even use some locking pliers if you have to. Just be very careful not to damage the boot. Once you're holding onto that stud so it can't spin, go ahead and remove the nut. And then slide it out and away from the strut. Now let's go ahead and hold the rotor up against the hub here, and we'll just take one of our lug nuts and we're going to bottom this out. That essentially is going to hold the rotor for us. Let's move along to removing our axle nut. For that, there's going to be a cotter pin that holds it in place. Go ahead and remove that cotter pin. And then we'll use a 32mm socket to remove the axle nut. Next, we'll use a hammer and a punch. We're going to come right in the center here of the axle. Essentially, we just want to break this free from the wheel bearing. Make sure that axle can flow freely inside the bearing, and we can move along. Now let's use a 21mm wrench on each of these bolts right here, and we'll remove the 21mm nut on the rearward side as well. Remove those bolts. Inspect them, set them aside. Now let's go ahead and grab onto the strut and the knuckle of the vehicle, and we're going to start separating these. Just be very careful not to put a tug on your flex hose or of course your ABS wire. Once this is separated, we'll just go ahead and lay it down and out of the way, making sure you're putting no tug on your axle. Now we're going to go ahead and get inside the engine compartment. On either side of the vehicle, you're going to be able to find your strut tower. For the strut, you're going to find 3 mounting bolts. One here out in the open, one that you can see that's underneath this cowl area here, but then the third one is going to be located behind this rubber boot right here. Yeah, you could try to remove this boot and you should be able to have access to remove that bolt. Typically, you're going to drop it and it's going to end up someplace inside this area here, which can potentially be very difficult to remove. And especially when you try to replace the brand new bolt, if you drop that one as well, you're going to find that there's an issue. So, like I said, you can either try to remove this boot and see if you can get that bolt out and all the rest of them, put it back in, or you can continue on by removing this cowl, which is the way we're going to show you how to do it. Now, with all that said, let's move along to removing our wiper arms. To remove these, what we want to do is just take a nice flat screwdriver. We're going to try to get underneath this protective boot. After that, you can remove your nut right here, and then we can remove the arm. Then we'll do the same on the other one. Let's use our 14mm socket. Go ahead and remove the nut. The next thing I'm going to do is just wiggle this a little bit to try to break it free from the wiper transmission. Set this one aside. Do the same to the drivers. With the arms out of the way, let's continue on over at the passenger side. You're going to find your washer fluid hose right here. We just want to go ahead and give this a little twist and disconnect it. Check it, make sure it's not torn or worn in any way, and then we'll just go ahead and set it aside. After that, we're going to be looking for some push clips that hold down this plastic cowl. There's going to be one on each corner right here. These ones are a little different than the rest. For this one, you just essentially pull up on the center and then you can pop out the entire piece. You're going to also find some others, which are pretty basic. These ones overall, you just go ahead and get under them and you can pop them right up. There's one up in the corner hiding. All right, now that we have this side off, we'll do the same on the other side of the vehicle. Now the next thing we want to do is remove this weather stripping right along here. We only need to do half of it. So for this, what I want to do is just kind of lift it up a little bit. I'm going to pull it towards one side, release it on that side, and then bring it to the other portion. We'll just do that down the line. Now with this pulled out of the way, we have access to this one last push clip here. For this one, I just kind of grab underneath the plastic. I can lift it up and pop that right out. Now we're just going to give this a little wiggle. As you can tell, this one right here is still holding it down, so I'll just go ahead and pop this right out of the way as well. Sometimes these clips can be a little bit hard to get out. There we are. Now we can lift this up and out of here. You want to be very careful for any of your washer fluid hoses. Those clips out of there. Lift this up. We can get this out of the way. Now that we have that whole cowl out of the way, we have access to all three of our mounting bolts. Like I said before, we have one out in the open, one that's a little bit harder to get to, and now the other one is out in the wide open right back here. Let's start removing these 13mm headed bolts. For this one that's out in the open, I always just kind of leave it in there a few good threads. Then we can move along to doing the other two, and you don't have to worry about the strut falling out while you continue. This one's a little harder to get to. You'll have to use a wrench. Now we can go ahead and hold on to that strut. We'll finish removing our last bolt here. And then we can remove it from through the wheel well. There it is, friends. Now the strut should have come with some brand new bolts. So what we want to do is just take those and we're going to apply some red thread locker. After that, I'll go ahead and put this up and through the wheel well. We'll get it lined up with its bolt holes. There's at least one. I'm going to go ahead and start in my bolt. Now we can make our way back into the wheel well. Now what we want to do is carefully start lifting everything up. We also want to make sure that our flex hose and our ABS wire is in the proper placement before we put anything else together. Let's go ahead and take that flex hose. We're going to put it down and underneath the bottom of the strut here so it comes along the back side. For the ABS wire, we want that coming along this area so it comes up and over along the top of here. Now we can just go ahead and start taking this. We'll press it up. Get this lined up. Now we'll take both of our bolts. We can start these through. Start on both of the nuts. Double check to make sure everything's fit perfectly. We know that we have it so the flex hose can come along the backside here and it's fit into where it needs to be. The ABS wire isn't crushed in between this area and it can be mounted properly. Now we can go ahead and grab our 21mm wrench and socket, start snugging this up, and then torquing it to manufacturer's specification. The torque for these is 110 foot-pounds. Now we can get our brake flex hose in here. For this, you want to bring it along the back side of the strut, and then we're just going to carefully try pressing it up and through the center. You might notice that it doesn't want to fit, so you might have to twist it a little bit. Once you have it so it feels as though it's into the groove, we'll go ahead and take our clip, slide this right up and into position here. Make sure that's nice and secure. For the ABS wire, you're going to find that it has a couple grooves here. We just want to go ahead and slide it right in there, make sure it's nice and secure, and then do the same to the other side. Now we can take care of this sway bar link. Go ahead and press it up in here, slide it through, put on the nut. Then we'll hold the stud, snug this up, and torque that to manufacturer's specification as well. Now we'll torque this to 58 foot-pounds. Now we can start putting on our axle nut. For the axle nut, you always want to make sure that you put these on by hand. You can use a ratchet, but you never want to use an impact gun because if you over tighten it, you could potentially damage your bearing. Let's go ahead and bottom this out. Now the next thing we're going to do is torque this to 98 foot-pounds, but what you're going to notice when you try to tighten it is that it's going to want to spin on you. To prevent that, I'm going to use a nice long pry bar, come through these lug studs, being very careful not to damage the threading, and bring this right on down to the ground. That'll prevent it from spinning on me. You could, of course, also use somebody inside the vehicle to step on the brake instead of using the bar. Once you have it torqued, go ahead and use a cotter pin. We'll just go ahead and put it right through there. Then we're just going to peen this over so there's no way the nut can loosen up on its own. Let's get this lug nut off of here. We can grab our wheel. Now at this point, we'll just go ahead and snug up all of our lug nuts, get the wheel back on the ground, and then we can torque the wheel to manufacturer's specification. Now with the wheel safely back on the ground, let's go ahead and torque all 4 of our lug nuts to 80 foot-pounds. If you had a hubcap, go ahead and put that on now. You want to make sure that the valve stem hole lines up with the valve stem. Give it a couple loving bonks, make sure it's completely secured so it doesn't fall off while you're driving down the road. Now with the complete weight of the vehicle back down on the ground, we can continue on by torquing all 3 of our mounting bolts to 21 foot-pounds. This one's obviously a little bit harder to torque. I'll go ahead and tighten that up with a wrench. Alright, so now at this point I showed you the majority of the process of installing your front strut. What you're going to want to do though is do the exact same thing on the other side of the vehicle before you go ahead and put in that plastic cowl. With that said, go ahead and do that now, and then we can continue on to putting in the plastic cowl. Okay, now we can start putting our plastic cowl back up on here. Let's turn it over real quick and have a quick look. You want to pay special attention to your hose. You want to make sure that it's completely secured inside this area so it's not going to fall down and potentially get caught in your wiper transmission. Also along this area here, which is the area that's supposed to go up against the windshield, there's kind of a carve out. Essentially you want to make sure that the windshield goes in between those 2 areas as we slide this in. There we are. I'm just going to get my plastic tab up and through there. Do the same for this one, making sure that our hose is inside the center area right here. Now we can start getting this on here. There should be a little white tab right there that holds the centerpiece in there. Ours is missing. We're going to take this black clip right here. We'll place it in right there. You can tell it's where it goes because it doesn't have a hole in the molding here. Now that we've got that in there, let's continue on to this area here. I'm just going to go ahead and pull out this tab. Get that right out of there. Now we can start putting on our weather stripping. Now for this, what you want to do is just take the tab. You're going to put one of the ears in and through, and then just go ahead and stretch it carefully without tearing it, and put the other end in as well. Once that's in there, you can go ahead and press this down and in. Lock it, make sure it's secure, and we'll just do the same to the rest down the line here. Got one more. Start that in. Now we can do these. For these, essentially just put one of the ears in, stretch it a little bit, slide it over, make sure that's secure, and do the same on this one. The next thing we're going to want to do is start putting in the rest of our push clips here. We've got the larger one, which goes in the corner right here. Push in the outer portion and then lock it in by the center. On this side as well. Let's get this washer fluid hose plugged in. Make sure it's on there securely. Now it's time to start putting on our wiper arms. I'm going to have the wiper blade so it's lined up pretty much as parallel as possible to the ground. After that, we can just go ahead and press this down. Let's get our nut on there. Snug it up. Okay, bottomed out right there. Snug it up a little bit more. Now we can put this on. Now we'll just go ahead and do the same to the passenger side. Okay friends, we got the car all back together. What's left to do now? Now you're just going to want to go ahead and hop inside the passenger compartment and test those wiper blades. Make sure they function properly and they don't hit up against anywhere that they're not supposed to hit. You also want to make sure that you test the washer nozzles and make sure that they spray out some washer fluid for you. Super important. Other than that, take it for a road test down to your local alignment shop. Thanks.